Greetings, welcome to Therapist Take, and we are back with another episode. We're going to talk about another thing that happens in betrayal trauma treatment, which is what we call the changing of the rules. So you definitely don't want to miss this, so don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Therapist Take, and this it will ultimately be episode 3 of our podcast when it eventually drops. And you can also go back and watch the other episodes on Facebook and YouTube. And we do record these live, so if you ever want to participate live in the episodes, so if you're listening to this on the podcast or watching one of the rebroadcasts, you can tune in live. We usually try to do them on Fridays around 12:30. We always say around because we usually have some kind of technical difficulty or something. It's like 12:30-ish.
Yeah.
And we also have, like, Mary and Josie did it last week with their show, which is Are You in Session, which they talk about more about what goes on in the mind of the therapist and the therapist process of. So I think last time they were talking about setting goals in therapy, but they also kind of welcome people into the mind of the therapist on like why that is important for them and what goes on for them and things like that. So it's a really neat concept, and they're really good friends, and so it's fun watching them on their show. But we are back with another deep thing. I think it's deep, anyways, which is talking about this idea of changing the rules. So I have a question for you, though.
Oh, okay, of course.
Are you a rule follower or not a rule follower?
Are you asking for you? Or are you asking?
Let's just act like I don't know you that well.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a rule follower. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But to be fair, if the rules don't make sense, then that is not the case.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think I like to toe the line of the rules.
Okay, middle child.
Right. Like, in fact, I have some friends of mine call me a line stepper. Just if I cross a line, I don't want it to be too far.
Not too bad.
Just enough to, but oddly enough, when I play board games, like, I am a rule follower. I am as my wife says, a stickler for the rules.
Okay.
To the point where there are some board games she will not play with me because I'm like, hey, babe, that's not the rule.
Well, you sound fun, Josh.
It's fun if you follow the
fun
rules.
If the rules are fun.
The rules say.
I know.
And she's kind of like, it's funny because she's probably more of a rule follower than I am, but when it comes to board games, she's like, oh, I'll just make up my own rules, type thing. So I know what it is about board games. But
I don't know. They bring out parts of us.
what do you do? Do you follow the rules in board games?
Yes. What's the point of playing them if there's no rules?
Exactly.
But
Right.
I also don't like board games that aren't fun. So I won't even engage in that.
Right.
Like Monopoly.
Yeah.
Why would you want to spend hours doing that?
Oh,
That sounds
Monopoly's
awful.
Oh, it's so much fun.
No.
But I feel that way about
I'd
like
rather go to the
Risk
dentist.
and some of the other strategy games.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, Monopoly's my one long game. I'm done. Yeah.
Okay.
So
No
we're talking
thanks.
about changing the rules.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
And, but I think, despite how much you consider yourself a rule follower or not, our brains do like
Yes.
rules.
Right. They do.
Yeah. And our brains will naturally resist change. So when we talk about, like, if you're thinking to yourself, I'm not somebody who likes change. I'm like, nobody is. Nobody likes it.
Most people don't. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, it's not natural for us to like welcome change. Like, I think we really have to be intentional with something that's really like what I would consider a real change. I think some like subtle changes, subtle differences, and I think we can welcome that. But it's like a real change creates some kind of level of risk, and it makes us nervous and anxious, and throws us off our game, so to speak. Sometimes.
Well done.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
So I brought it back to
I
the
know
board
you
game.
did.
But nobody knows the rule changes or what I call the collapse of the rule system better than betrayed partners. So people have been betrayed through infidelity or sex addiction, things like that, and because it's just so abrupt,
Right.
it's more of a obliteration of the rule system
Right.
than a collapse of the rule system.
Right.
But before we go down that, let's talk about the idea of a rule system in couple relationships,
Okay.
because I don't think most people think about relationships as having rules.
Right. No, I don't think so either. And I think that sounds very boring. And I don't think people would sit down and say, let's think about couple rules, right?
Right.
But let's even talk about why. Part of the reason we're talking about this today was because we're in the holiday season. It's about to be Thanksgiving. And so this is a time when the rules of family systems are often very apparent, right?
Right.
We always go to this person's place. We always eat these foods. We always watch football, whatever. And so those are, some rules that traditions, right? You could call them traditions. You can call them rules, because if you've ever been in a family that has traditions and you don't go with those traditions,
Right.
then you get a strong response because you're breaking the rules.
You're breaking the rules.
That's right.
Exactly.
Right. So that got us kind of thinking about rules in relationships.
Right. Because, typically around this time when we're doing, whether it's, on YouTube or writing a blog or something, I'm really kind of big on, like, it's Thanksgiving, but not everybody's thankful.
Right.
And when we were talking about doing this episode, we're like, what if things can be different, good,
Yeah.
like good, different, but I think that it's, that takes some time, like you can have new traditions, you can create a new way of doing things, whether it's how you do holidays or just how you do Monday, like it can be different and it can be good, but our brains naturally push back.
Right.
It's uncomfortable with it because it's not territory we're familiar with.
Right.
So there's a sense of unsafety there.
Yes, absolutely. Right? Yeah. I think what you're speaking to just, reminds us how much our brains like certainty and familiarity, even if it's not good or pleasant. Like lots of times we do things like, I don't know why I do this.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think we gravitate toward that.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And so as I was kind of saying earlier with the, I don't think couples often think of their relationships having a governing set of rules, but they do. And and I think most of them are implicit.
I agree.
Some of them are explicit.
Sure.
Can you remember any from like your relationship where you're like, one thing we're going to do is da 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 da,
No, I'm trying to even think back to like our premarital training when we would do rules and roles with people.
Yeah.
Even examples of explicit rules.
Like one that I can think of with me and my wife was like, we talked a lot about like, hey, do you have any interest in joining the military?
Really?
And we're like, and I'm like, no, not really. Do you? No. It's like, okay, then we're good. We can move forward. Like we didn't really want to be. It had nothing to do with being anti-military or anything. It's just we didn't want to be in a relationship where there was that potential to just be uprooted and travel. And things. So that became kind of an explicit rule. Like we're not going to be that family. We're not going to. That's not going to be part of the rule system for us.
Yeah.
But that's the only one I can think of just off the cuff, because most of them are implicit.
This isn't mean, but some clients have like, you're going to, earn the money.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Or you're the one who manages the money.
Sure. Like traditional values.
Sure, versus more shared
and values is another way to think of rules.
Absolutely.
Like
you can use a lot of different language, but I think the reason we're choosing rules today too is to give us kind of how we started, the idea of do you follow, should you follow, how do we make them? Because I also think that what we're talking about when we move now more into implicit rules is that a lot of times these implicit rules are not working anymore.
Right. I think we outgrow them.
Right. Even if it's not like you mentioned betrayal trauma or some trauma or addiction,
Exactly.
sometimes, like milk it just expires. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of times if you're going to be in a relationship for a long time, a committed relationship for a long time, it can freak you out when the rules are changing,
Yeah.
right? And I think it's very important to normalize, well, they have to change because you're not in year 1 or year 5 or year 10, right? And so but I think that the awareness that, it's just time to update the rules. It's time to update our policies and procedures as a
Right.
relationship, right?
Yeah, and I think it's, yeah, I think you're right. I think every couple goes through this. If you've got some distance in your marriage, or your committed relationship that you're in, you're going to experience the relationship kind of evolving, right? And
Right.
the way I always describe it, it's like a child that grows and develops, and if you try to keep your 18-year-old 13, you're going to have problems,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And then the child cries out,
Yes.
in childlike ways usually, and the marriage cries out. And I think that's one of the functioning pieces of or one of the functional reasons we have arguments.
Sure.
It's the relationship doing its part in communicating
Right.
the desire for change.
Yeah.
And but I also think too, when we launch into our adult life, it's we're launched with kind of our parents' playbook, or grandparents, or whoever it is, that whatever domain you were under,
Sure.
in their rule system, and it's like they handed us a playbook and with a bunch of blank spaces, and we just kind of played Mad Libs with it for a while. And then we start to realize that their way doesn't necessarily work for us.
Sure.
And we have to create a new playbook. But when couples get to a point, and I think most of us go through this, like you said, whether it's we were betrayed or not, it's infidelity is definitely one of those things that will throw people into this very quickly.
Right.
But it doesn't have to be that. I think most couples will hit a point where enough of life happens that they're really rethinking the entire rule system of their life.
Sure.
And can be kind of overwhelming. I've often described it as somebody handed you, where your parents handed you a book that you're just playing Mad Libs with. Now you're being handed a book that's just a bunch of blank pages. There's not even a table of contents. And it's like, where do I start?
What is this? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's, and again, nobody knows that better than betrayed partners, because it's such an abrupt collapse.
Right.
And they're having to rethink all the rules and put them under the microscope and decide what am I going to do with it? Is this a rule that's going to work?
Right.
So, I mean, that's one of the questions I actually pose too, is how what's your thoughts on like how a couple would decide, like, does this rule make the cut, or does it not make the cut, or do I change this one, and what do I change it to?
Yeah. I mean, there's not a fast answer to that, right? But I think, I think it starts a lot with some individual searching and self-awareness, right? Of how is this rule working? Well, let me check in with myself. Is it working for me? Right? Let's take that explicit rule we started with. If one of the members of the relationship was in charge of finances, and, after betrayal, you find out that not knowing finances was, it feels like part of the deception, then you have to do some self-awareness of, all right, then am I ready to check back in? Does that rule work? Does that, I need to be a part of this?
Right.
And so I think it starts with some self-awareness, maybe even some exploring your own individual identity, right?
Yeah.
Like, who do I want to be? What kind of person do I want to be? And
Right.
then what kind of partner do I want to be? And then what kind of relationship do I want to have?
Yeah. What you're talking about too is really quite challenging too, like in terms of, like, if you're listening to this, like trying to conceptualize what does that look like, because there sometimes, like, because this is kind of the journey of self-discovery, that journey of self-awareness, and And sometimes it's just like, I don't, I'm changing the rule for no other reason than I want to.
Yeah.
So it's like, so why aren't you paying attention to finances like you used to? I'm just trying to go with your example.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the answer is like, I just don't want to.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And
Yep.
it's to me, looking like kind of looking in on that as a therapist, to me that's really an effort to establish, or the where do you end and I begin phenomenon. Sometimes I just have to say no, just to hear myself say it,
Sure.
to establish my individuality,
Mm-hmm.
and that lets me know I'm me and you're you, and we're not, our
We're not fused
right. Yeah, we're not
to
attached at
one
the hip, so to
identity.
speak. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not a ball and chain.
Yeah. Yuck.
Right. I hate that
Mm-hmm. I
concept.
hate that too.
That imagery.
Yeah, me too.
I just want to know who's
Who
the
signs up for that?
well, who's the ball and chain, who's the prisoner.
I know. I guess like anything, both of them by virtue.
Guess so.
Yeah.
I don't know which one I'd rather be.
I don't either.
An inanimate object that holds people back,
Or the person held back.
or the guy being held back.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
so I kind of feel like the ball and chain has a better deal. I really do.
Maybe.
Because at least they don't know what's
That's
going
true.
on.
That's true. The awareness, like we're just talking about.
Right. We can pick apart metaphors.
I know.
But so another thing that I think viewers that were just on the edges of their seats tuned in,
Yeah.
but we are just to kind of just real quickly, just kind of revamp what we're talking about on this episode. We're talking about the governing rules in couple relationships and how those, for most people, will get challenged and kind of have to be revamped, like what I call a collapse of the rule system. But it's especially true in couples who have experienced betrayal trauma, whether it's sex addiction or infidelity, chronic infidelity. But where we were when the video kind of cut out on us is we were talking about how people will can identify their rules because we were talking about how they are often implicit, and so the way that I do that I'll do that right in session with couples is when I hear them say words like supposed to or should have, and you mentioned always and never.
Mm-hmm.
Those words are reflecting rules,
Right.
and they're often implicit.
Yeah.
And so I'll stop them right in the middle of it and say, like, why should you?
Right. Why must you?
Yeah.
Why should
Who
you?
said that?
Right.
Is it in the Bible
How
or something?
come?
I mean,
Right. Where's that come
and sometimes
from?
right.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
And they often, most of us, and you and me included, when we have a governing set of rules, we don't step back every time and ask ourselves why. We just
Right.
do it. That's the
Right.
point of the rule. It's
That's
just
right. And usually, if you actually do trace lineage of that stuff, you'd be like, well, because when we got together, you took the trash out first, and so you're the trash taker outer, right?
Right.
Well, you do a better job cleaning the cooktop, so you clean the cooktop.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's a very,
Yeah.
like, just because it's what we've always done. It's the
Right.
tradition, right?
Exactly. Like, why why do men have to take their hats off indoors, which is not so much a thing anymore?
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, huh?
I remember asking my mom about that, like in church. I was like, why do the men have to take their hats off but women wear their hats? And her answer was, well, because their hats are part of their outfits, and I don't know if that's really how it started, but that's how she made sense of it. But we know there's some level of respect that started somewhere down the road, and people get really upset about that.
Sure.
Especially like national anthem,
Yeah.
things like that.
Right.
I was holding my daughter once in a ball game when the national anthem hit, and I'm holding her in one arm, and I got like something else in probably like nachos or something in the other hand, and the national anthem starts, and I'm just being still and just holding her, but I still have my hat on, and some lady walks up to me very politely and says, "Do you care if I remove your hat?" And I'm like, "Sure, please." Because we have a neural pathway that says this means something, and it bothers us, and so one thing I talked to him about, I said, I'm not saying that you should or shouldn't do it.
Right.
I'm just wanting you to take a step back when you catch yourself using those words or feeling those words, and just take a step back to ask yourself, why should we?
Right.
Why should I? Is this going to be a rule that's going to be in my new playbook?
Relationship, my new book, yeah.
And or is it going to be completely nixed? Or is there just going to be some version of it, some kind of modification? And I think it's kind of daunting a little bit.
It is daunting,
because
sure.
there's a lot of rules.
Well, and I think when you're looking at it through the lens of trauma rather than just looking at it as a developmental experience, there's pain associated with it, right? So,
Sure.
you use if you have an 18-year-old that you have 13-year-old rules, you're probably going to have some behavior problems and conflict, right? And that's an indicator developmentally you need to change the rules, right? That's not that may be a parenting mishap or whatever, but when you have a betrayal trauma or another trauma or addiction, and you didn't just, slowly grow and develop into the need for a change, like you use the word obliterated. So the rules must change. And for partners, they didn't ask for them to change. Right. So the injustice of the rules changing means we can't just sit down and say, should we change the way we do finances? Should we change the way we do sex? Should we change the amount of time we spend with your family? It's not coming at it from a curious or neutral position. It's coming at it from pain.
Right.
And so that makes changing the rules, right? Not just, hey, let's knock this new plan out in this one afternoon.
Right. And I think that with people who are doing betrayal trauma recovery, so there's been infidelity of some sort, a discovery, and there's that obliteration, as we just said. What they will eventually enter into when we start helping them tackle this whole rule change, and a lot of times I don't think they understand, or would anybody expect them to, but that a lot of people go through that process without the injury of betrayal, right? Because as we said earlier, it's just, infidelity or sex addiction or that discovery of some kind of deception like that will definitely launch people into that space real quickly. Yeah. And so then part of what couples who are doing betrayal trauma recovery have to do is they have to deal with a infidelity injury in addition to this whole process of changing the rules. That is actually something most couples, I think, go through at some point in time.
Yeah, you'll have to.
But a lot of people go through it without having to do with the betrayal trauma stuff. Right. I think my wife and I went through that. I did not have to. I can relate to that part of it with clients. I can't relate to the infidelity injury part of it, and that definitely makes it more complicated. Sure. Exacerbates the injury or the pain of it, I guess.
Yeah.
Is the way to say
and
that.
I think too, if today what we're talking about can it be a good change, I definitely want to say this before we go there. We're not trying to just be Pollyanna and say, oh, something terrible happened and, we can find reasons and it can all be better. I definitely want to make sure that we're clear about that.
Yeah.
But I also do think that we're asking people to think, how do we do this differently and can it be good?
Yeah.
Right? Because I do think that one of the core concepts around resiliency, is the idea that when things happen, you can be flexible enough to find the opportunity in it.
Right. Yeah. And, so yeah, I'm glad you said that about, especially people who are in the middle of it, when probably the last thing you want to hear somebody say is, don't worry, it'll get better.
Yeah.
Like when you're like in the middle of that
Yeah.
injury, and like, shut up,
Sure.
you know?
That's awful.
Right. And so, and there also is no guarantee the relationships work out,
Right.
because the challenge of changing the rules is kind of the two individuals are kind of assessing for themselves what kind of rules do I want to operate under, and then can we get our two rule systems to dance,
Right.
and find a beat we can dance to. And,
Yeah.
and that's challenging, and
Yeah.
and it doesn't always end with them getting to be together, But let's when we talk about this daunting task of doing that, and we started out by talking about like the rules that come with holidays. Like we all have these rules or these traditions that we follow. Let's talk about how we might help somebody approach the firsts. The first the first Thanksgiving under a rule system that hasn't been fully fleshed out yet.
Yeah.
The first Christmas or the first birthday.
Yeah. It's gonna require it's probably gonna feel really strange in the sense that you're like, oh, do we, you have to ask a lot of questions. Are we doing this? Do I still, do we go to the same place at the same time with the same people? Do we make the same food? Do we, when it comes to gift giving things, do we still buy? You have to ask a lot of those questions. And what felt automatic, oh, I always do this, we always do that, all of a sudden is left with questions. And that can be uncomfortable, right? It's confusing and new. But I also think it's a great opportunity to say, right, like we were talking about Thanksgiving food. Why do you have to make that? If nobody eats it, why do we make it?
Right. Exactly.
Right? Could it be okay to replace something nobody eats with something that they do?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, how many times have we just eaten something because we were expected to? Maybe I don't want to anymore. Maybe I don't want to eat that.
Right. Maybe I don't want to go there, or maybe I don't want to go there at
Sure.
that time, or maybe I don't want to stay that long, or
that's a big
maybe
one.
I don't want to talk to that person the whole time, or
maybe I don't want to do it at all right now.
maybe I don't want to do it at all right now. Maybe I'm staying in my PJs.
Right.
And
Which we know we have a mutual friend that's doing that right now.
you bet. And so I think that's what this is about, is exploring. And I think you can find when you start doing this, you feel empowered, right?
Right. Yeah. But I think that empowerment, especially in the beginning, comes with a hint of sadness because of loss.
Sure.
It's butting right up against it, and it's kind of like, when you lose a loved one, like that first year is hard.
It is.
The second year is hard, probably not as hard as the first year,
Right.
and it gets less difficult as you figure out the new rule system
Right.
that you're operating in that doesn't involve that person anymore, right? And I think the same thing. It's a very similar experience when it comes to the loss of the relationship. It's just what we would call an ambiguous loss, right? Which is Pauline Boss's work, right? On the loss that it's a loss, but you're still here. So it does. How does that work?
It's not, it doesn't have the same rules around it.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So one thing that I think is really important for people to do is to plan, is to have a plan for a particular part of you that usually lets you know very quickly that this part will exist without your permission, and that is your emotional self.
Yeah.
So when people going through this, like, they just start feeling things they've never felt before. They feel like they can't control them. They just happen, and they get nervous about these particular settings because they know there's a set of rules that they're not confident they're going to be able to follow anymore.
Right.
And so, of course, during the holidays, as we approach the holidays, I'm sure you're doing the same thing with your clients. There's a lot of these conversations going on.
Yes.
What's your plan? What's your plan for Thanksgiving?
Right.
How are you going to honor this part that has made itself clear that it will exist and operate with or without your permission?
It's like a toddler. It's coming. Right.
Right. So how are you going to honor it?
Yes.
And
with respect.
Right.
Yeah.
which means as you said, yeah, I might not be able to stay as long. I might need an out. Might need to plan a pre-planned excuse to
Right.
just leave for a little bit,
You
just
bet.
to go driving around the car and breathe,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
or sometimes it's like, I just can't go this year. I
Right.
I
It's
can't
best for
go
me
and
not to do
honor
it.
this feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we help clients give language to that, right? What do I say? What do I do? And the plan and the, again, you name these things so that they can be tamed and you can, connect to that with less shame and judgment and criticism of, well, oh my gosh, what if my mouth runs away with itself? Okay,
Right.
what if it does? Right. So
Yeah.
it's part of this letting go of old rules and finding the ones that fit for now. Right.
Right.
So I know that part is, like you said, can feel scary or unpredictable. But boy, it's a sure important part of this function to change the rules.
Right. Yeah. Another one I like to mention too is, all feelings are welcome.
Yep. You bet.
So again, here I go with it. Don't. The rule is you're supposed to be thankful on Thanksgiving. You might be, and you might not be.
And you might be someone
unthankful
else.
might show up.
Right.
And there
Right.
needs to be room for that.
That's right.
A common example I give a lot, though, is because another first is what does family vacation look like?
You bet.
And one of the rules that I think is pretty common in our culture is that you're supposed to, you hear me saying it?
Yeah, I heard it.
You're supposed to go on your vacation and enjoy yourself and have fun. And enjoyment equals laughing, happiness, playing, playfulness, so on and so forth. Probably not in that picture. You don't envision a lot of hurt or crying or,
Right.
Sadness. And if there is, that means you ruined vacation, right? That's
Yeah.
the rule.
Yeah.
We're changing the rules.
That's
So all feelings are welcome. So
right.
the way I say it is, look, I'd rather be crying on a beach than crying in my bed.
You bet. Yeah.
And so if you got to take a day, if one of your days on your vacation is just being sad, then that's just what's going to have to happen.
sure.
And you did not ruin vacation
No.
because of it.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's a great example. Yeah.
Those are only two things I could think of that planning and welcoming in all emotions are welcome. Is there anything else you think?
Well, I would
be
just
good?
also just add one other element to that. Yeah, is that in this transition period, nothing has to stick. So do
that's a good
what
one.
you do now, and you can decide what you're going to do next
Right.
holiday season and the next time.
Yeah.
Right.
In fact, most of it won't. It's because
Right.
it's a polishing
Because it's
process. Yeah.
But I think that the idea of being present it gives your yourself, your journey, your nervous system permission to just be what's in front of it, and that's just it's really a I don't know. It has such meaning to say, I don't know. I don't have to come up with the rules for the next 25 years of my life right now. I'm going to decide what I'm going to do today. Right. So that's why I don't play Monopoly. Right. It's too long.
Yeah.
Right. So you don't have to make decisions about what do I do every Thanksgiving for now.
Yeah.
Right.
And it might be choppy and unpolished and unkempt.
You bet.
Who cares?
Right.
You got to start somewhere.
You do.
Right.
Absolutely.
And you get permission to be messy.
Yeah. Right. And mess it up and change your mind.
Right. In fact, I really do think if we would give ourselves more permission to be messy, we'd probably create a lot less bigger messes for ourselves.
Yeah.
In that sense.
Yeah.
But I think we covered it all.
Oh, it's done.
It's done.
We fixed. Everyone will be ready to change rules, and they'll see it as adaptive and healthy, and they won't have any struggles with it.
Any book you that just pops into your head that kind of, because I was thinking about this earlier, and I was like, man, I don't know if there has been anything really written just about that. I'm sure there's probably chapters and articles and research done.
When you talk about rules and why things are, and that the meaning is just a collective agreement. Yuval Harari's,
Yeah,
A Brief History, right?
I was like that
Sapiens.
book is so going to come up in this episode
Okay,
because
yeah,
you
because
know
it's
how much it means to me and you.
it's a
Yeah.
brain buster of rules, right?
Yes.
So maybe that.
But I think that one for us is because it just challenged us so
Yes.
much conceptually. It's not really a book about
No,
rules.
right.
It's just
But that's what the profound impact was, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
no doubt in
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I think that I'm sure Gottman has some stuff in there about
Right. I don't
but
think
probably Helen Fisher is the one that I'm thinking
that's
about the
another.
most.
Yeah. See, but we're going large scale here. And us looking at historians and anthropology and large
Yeah.
scale, right? Because I think
Yeah.
it's just, I don't know. I think a scale is zoom in, zoom out on things,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah, and so I'll make sure to post some links, especially because I know Helen Fisher has written some stuff recently about the how values shift and change in relationships, and I'll definitely hit on that.
Okay.
But let me just mention real quickly, there is one book that had a profound impact on me with this idea, and really kind of influential in my therapeutic approach and stuff like that. And it's called The Sin of Certainty
oh yes.
by Pete Enns, and it is a book on kind of the same concept but from a spiritual angle, but that's not it. It didn't have a spiritual impact on me. It really made me think a lot about the work that we're doing and what people and couples are going through, and how certainty and uncertainty work in that, and how something like a death or infidelity or something like that can just completely disrupt an entire governing system of rules.
Yeah.
So that'd be one. And I just want people to be clear that I'm not. For me personally, it was not a book that had an impact on my spirituality very much so, but it was really well done. I thought it was anyways. So.
Okay. Well, there's our just a few suggestions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, oddly enough, like movies too, but we'll stay out of that.
Yeah,
now.
Josh,
But,
you
like,
could go for
I
hours
just
about
like
movies.
stories.
I know you do. I know.
Yeah.
I know.
It's like the power of story.
Sure. I know.
But we better go. So,
Okay.
you keep talking about this forever.
I know.
Because we missed something in
Of-
there.
of
I'm sure we got
something, a lot.
There's probably a fourth one in there.
I'm
Fourth
sure.
point. All right. Well, we appreciate any support that people give, whether you're listening to this or watching this, sharing it.
Sharing feedback.
Feedback would be great. Making posts and comments on different types of topics like similar to this that you think you would like to get our take on. That's why it's called Therapist's Take. And maybe we will work that into another episode.
Yeah.